The Beatles cinematic universe is coming to theaters near you. We've seen a lot of musician biopics over the years. They just released Bob Marley One Love in theaters last week. So, would it even be possible to do one musical biopic on the Beatles? Director Sam Mendes doesn't think so, which is why he's doing 4 of them. Deadline broke the news today that the Oscar winning director of American Beauty, 1917, and Skyfall is planning to make 4 interwoven biopics, one about each member of the Beatles. And what's more, Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, and the families of George Harrison and John Lennon have given Mendes full life story rights and music rights. There was apparently a lot of interest in this 4-movie deal around Hollywood, but Sony won out and will be the studio backing it. Mendes' producing partner, Pippa Harris, said this in a statement: "We intend this to be a uniquely thrilling and epic cinematic experience. 4 films told from 4 different perspectives, which tell a single story about the most celebrated band of all time." But I have a question. With the band and their families on board, how honest will this be about what actually happened? Harris has an answer for that as well. What is truly exciting is for Sam to have the freedom to delve into the lives of each of the Beatles, with nothing off limits and no sense of the band wanting him to tell a particular authorized version of their rise to success. All right, hopefully they're true to their word on that. After Madam Web, Sony could use some good press. But this sounds like a very ambitious and maybe even a risky project, because it's going to rely on 1, good writing, 2, very good casting. You need to nail who's going to play the Beatles across 4 movies, and then an audience that's actually interested in seeing 4 Beatles movies in theaters. Because if the first one's not good, are they really going to go see all of the others? A new movie has broken the Shakespeare record at the box office. These are the 5 highest grossing live action Shakespeare adaptations of all time. At 5 is 1999's 10 Things I Hate About You, which is based on Taming of the Shrew and made $53.5 million worldwide. 4 is She's the Man from 2006, starring Amanda Bynes. It's based on Twelfth Night and made $57 million. At 3, you've got the 2021 West Side Story, which is based on Romeo and Juliet. It brought in $76 million. And then at 2 is Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, which for 28 years had been the highest grossing live action Shakespeare adaptation. It made $147.6 million in 1996. But it just got taken out like Mercutio in the streets of Verona, as the Sydney Sweeney Glenn Powell rom-com Anyone But You just surpassed it with $189 million at the global box office. In case you're not aware, Anyone But You is based on Much Ado About Nothing, and has had a miraculous run in theaters. Now, it should be noted there are 2 big asterisks for this list. 1, this list doesn't include the 2019 Lion King, which is based on Hamlet, because was it actually live action if the characters were all CGI? And 2, this list is not adjusted for inflation. If it was, Romeo and Juliet would still be on top, as $147.6 million is more like $300 million in today's dollars. That said, the fact remains a lot of people have seen Anyone But You in theaters. And if you haven't yet, it hits on demand today. Christopher Nolan left the sweetest note for Cillian Murphy on the cover of his Oppenheimer script. Before Oppenheimer, Murphy had worked with Nolan 5 times. He's in all the Batman movies, Inception, and Dunkirk. But he's always played a supporting character. That all changed with Oppenheimer. And as caught by 60 Minutes, Nolan was very aware of that fact. Writing on the cover of Murphy's script, "Dearest Killian, finally a chance to see you lead. Love, Chris." That might not seem very emotional to you, but also remember that Christopher Nolan is British. As a side note, the script was printed with black ink on red paper to prevent it from being photocopied. And I love how beaten up it is. You could tell that Murphy went over it many, many, many times. Cillian Murphy told the AP last year that he'd always be down to work with Christopher Nolan, no matter the size of the role. But, quote, "Deep down, secretly, I was desperate to play a lead for him." Murphy also explained that he got the role from Christopher Nolan via a cold call. "We have this long-standing understanding and trust and shorthand and respect. It felt like the right time to take on a bigger responsibility, and it just so happened that it was a huge one." Yeah, I'd say. Okay, I just got a little bit more optimistic about the Beetlejuice sequel. Michael Keaton's latest comments are a very good sign. In case you're not aware, Beetlejuice is set to come out in September of this year. It's been directed by Tim Burton, Michael Keaton is returning as the star role, and it's also going to feature Jenna Ortega, Monica Bellucci, Willem Dafoe, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, and Justin Theroux. And if you're wondering whether it will maintain the original's use of practical effects, here's what Michael Keaton just told People. "The one thing that Bert and I decided early on from the beginning, if we ever did it again, I was totally not interested in doing something where there was too much technology. It had to feel handmade." That's really great to hear. Obviously, green screen and CGI is kind of unavoidable in 2024, and I'm sure this movie is going to have plenty of it still, but it's nice to know that this will feel connected to the original by doing things sort of old school. Keaton went on, "It's the most exciting thing when you get to do that again after years of standing in front of a giant screen pretending somebody's across the way from you. This is just enormous fun." And he specifically talked about shooting a scene in a shrunken head room. What made it fun was watching somebody in the corner actually holding something up for you. To watch everybody in the shrunken head room and say, those are people under there operating these things, trying to get it right. Real puppeteers, real practical effects. What a concept. Beetlejuice wouldn't feel like Beetlejuice. Wait. Okay, I think we're good. If it relied too heavily on glossy visual effects. So while it's still possible that this movie's gonna be a disaster, at least they're trying, and so I'm hopeful for now. So a pretty alarming thing happened on stage at the BAFTAs yesterday that no one seemed to notice as it was going on. The BAFTAs are the British Oscars. And when Oppenheimer won Best Film, Christopher Nolan and the producers were joined on stage by this man, who is not related to the movie at all.
Thank you so much to BAFTA. This is an incredible honor, and as Chris said, this is a homecoming for us.
YouTube commenters have identified him as Liz Wani, a YouTuber known for crashing and sneaking into major events. He didn't do anything besides just stand on stage behind Nolan and the producers, but the BAFTAs, after the fact, put out a statement that he was removed by security, and that they're taking this security breach very seriously. While Liz Wani apparently didn't hurt anyone while he was up on stage, the reason this is so alarming is because it's easy to imagine what might have happened if, let's say, someone with more nefarious intentions had made it up on stage. It's crazy to think that just anyone could walk up there at any time, and so hopefully the SAG Awards and the Oscars are seeing this and are beefing up their security appropriately. The director of Madame Web just explained one of the movie's most bizarre choices. This video contains spoilers, so if you're somehow still interested in seeing it, save and come back later. One of the strangest things in Madame Web is despite the fact that they promoted Sydney Sweeney, Celeste O'Connor, and Isabella Merced as different iterations of Spider-Women, the movie doesn't actually contain how they got their powers or any of them in their suits being heroes in the present day. Instead, all of that Spidey action is relegated to flash forwards to a potential future envisioned by the movie's main villain. When asked about this, director S.J. Clarkson revealed this was an intentional choice. "I thought it would be a bit too greedy to do 4 origin stories." That's what she told comicbook.com. "First and foremost, it's Madame Web, right? This is a tease." She goes on to double down, saying that including all of their origin stories would have been too much story for one movie. If we separate the movie from its marketing, I think she was right to do things as she did. The notion that they could become heroes in the future, which then motivates the main villain to target them, I think is an interesting idea. And it's in line with the themes of fate versus free will that the movie was trying to get at. Pretty unsuccessfully, but that's besides the point. And yet Sony marketing could not help itself in promoting the movie with them as heroes. Which also makes sense. The marketing department's going to try and latch on to anything it possibly can that's cool that will sell the movie. But this then sets up the audience to have an expectation that the movie is not at all interested in meeting. And then everybody goes home confused and underwhelmed. It's time to address the elephant in the room. How much Pedro Pascal is too much Pedro Pascal? As this meme shows, he's collecting franchises like Infinity Stones. Starting with Game of Thrones, Pedro is the Mandalorian, he's the villain in Wonder Woman 1984, he's Joel on The Last of Us, and this week he was officially cast as Reed Richards in Marvel's The Fantastic Four. So my question to you, do you think Pedro Pascal is overexposed? Anecdotally, it seems like there might be a backlash forming around Pedro Pascal being in pretty much everything, but personally, I don't have a problem with his rise in ubiquity for 2 reasons. One, I think he's done a good job spacing out all of these major franchise roles. His appearances in Game of Thrones and DC, while memorable, were supporting performances, and then that put him on a path to lead opportunities. Then in Star Wars, we've only seen his face a couple of times. His voice work as the Mandalorian is solid, but it's also easy to forget that it's Pedro Pascal in there. And then The Last of Us was a big breakout role, but that was almost a year ago now. And the second season is still months, if not more, away. And then the other reason I don't mind it is because he's a great actor. You don't get jobs like this without being good at what you do. And he's just got this movie star quality, even though a lot of what he's done so far has been on TV. So to answer my own question, no, I don't think he's overexposed. But tell me otherwise if you do. Paul McCartney's famous lost bass was just recovered 51 years later. Here's how a group of fans found the legendary instrument. Back in the earliest days of the Beatles, Paul McCartney could be seen playing this 1961 Hofner bass. It's the same one that can be heard on the Beatles' first 2 albums. on songs like She Loves You and Twist and Shout. According to Entertainment Weekly, McCartney later moved on to other basses. But he still used this Hofner occasionally. That is, until 1972, when it was stolen out of the back of a van. An iconic piece of rock and roll history was just gone. Until now, that is. Because in 2018, a group of fans formed the Lost Bass Project with the intention of finding, quote, the bass that powered Beatlemania. They didn't have many leads for about 5 years, but according to the group's website, when investigative journalists Scott and Naomi Jones joined the cause, things really started to pick up. The Lost Bass Project received worldwide media attention, and the group got hundreds of leads and offers from people willing to help. So they were able to figure out that the bass had been stolen on October 10th, 1972, in the Notting Hill area of London. That info was then confirmed by a separate email, which led them to the thief's identity. The thief then apparently sold the bass to Ronald Guest, the landlord of the Admiral Blake pub in Ladbroke Grove. And the Lost Bass Project suspected that the bass then stayed within Guest's family. Then, because of the publicity the group got off a Sunday Telegraph article in September of last year, a Hastings, England resident, who according to the LA Times is related to Ronald Guest, came forward and returned the bass to Paul McCartney. It was just in storage at their house. It took 2 months to authenticate, but it is indeed Paul McCartney's bass, and it was still in its original case as well. The instrument is in rough shape, but it's going to be repaired and will be made playable once again.